My ex-husband tried to claim he was promised half of my inheritance during our divorce. In court, his lawyer said she should have shared it. I quietly presented the prenup agreement, clearly stating my inheritance was off limits. His lawyer's smug smile disappeared instantly. I never thought I'd be posting here, but I need to share how my greedy, manipulative, financially useless ex-husband tried to take half my inheritance during our divorce, and how it all blew up in his face in the most glorious, humiliating way possible. It started out as a regular divorce. Messy, emotional, expensive. But then my ex decided he was entitled to money he had no right to. The audacity of this man. Let me take you back to the beginning. I met Greg when I was in my early 30s. I had a solid career in marketing, made decent money, and had my life together. Greg was, well, he was fun. Spontaneous. The artistic type. He was a freelance photographer, but let's be honest, he barely worked. At first, I found it charming. He had this carefree, adventurous attitude. He talked about traveling the world, chasing dreams, living without the chains of corporate America. Meanwhile, I was paying the rent on time and maxing out my 401k. We were total opposites. And it worked. Until it didn't. Because while I was moving up in my career, Greg was still hopping from gig to gig, spending money he didn't have. Expensive camera lenses. Weekend trips. A motorcycle he didn't even know how to ride. I should have seen the red flags. But love makes you stupid. My parents knew. I didn't listen. When we got engaged, my parents, who had always been quietly skeptical of Greg, sat me down. They weren't rude about it. They didn't tell me not to marry him. But they were practical. You have a lot more to lose than he does, my dad said. And then they insisted on a prenup. Now, I'm not dumb. I made more money than Greg. I knew, logically, that a prenup made sense. But Greg? Lost his mind. He called it a betrayal. Said I was planning for our marriage to fail. I told him, if you're not planning to leave me, then why does it matter? Silence. He sulked for weeks. It was the worst fight we'd ever had. But in the end, he signed it. Maybe because he loved me. Maybe because he thought he'd never actually have to deal with it. Either way, the prenup was ironclad. Everything I earned was mine. Anything I inherited was mine. It was bulletproof. Marriage wasn't what Greg thought it would be. At first, he still pretended to be ambitious. He talked about his big photography projects. But over time, he stopped even pretending. He barely worked. He didn't clean. He resented me for having a steady job. If I had a rough day at work, Greg had it worse. If I got promoted, he'd joke, must be nice to sell your soul. If I asked him to contribute more financially, he'd say, I support us in other ways. What ways, Greg? Because the only thing he was supporting was his Xbox habit. I paid for everything, the mortgage, the bills, even his credit card debt. Then came the cheating. Because of course. I found out in the most humiliating way possible, through my coworker. The same coworker he used to make fun of for being boring. I walked in on texts. Explicit ones. Ones where he wasn't even trying to be discreet. I didn't say a word. Just took screenshots and sent them to my lawyer. Filed for divorce the next day. Greg? Lost it. But not because he felt bad. Not because he was sorry. Because he realized he was about to lose the life I built. At first, Greg did what all pathetic, manipulative exes do. He tried to make me feel guilty. We don't have to do this. I know I messed up, but let's just work through it. We built a life together, don't throw it away. Built a life together? Buddy, I built this. You just lived in it. When that didn't work, he got nasty. Started demanding half of everything. You wouldn't be where you are without me. I sacrificed my career for you. You owe me for the time I put into this marriage. My lawyer, Anne, who is an absolute shark, shut that down fast. She reminded him that he signed a prenup. Everything I earned was mine. Greg turned gray. He started stammering, trying to argue that he had supported me emotionally while I worked. As if I should pay him for being a bad roommate. And didn't even blink. Legally, Greg, you have no claim to her earnings. You agreed to that. I thought that would be the end of it. But then my father passed away. And suddenly, Greg saw dollar signs. My dad had been my rock. Losing him was devastating. I barely had time to process my grief before I realized Greg was paying attention. I inherited $3.2 million from my father's estate. And Greg? Oh, he went full gold digger. Suddenly, he wasn't angry anymore. He started calling me. Leaving voicemails. Apologizing. I've been thinking a lot. Maybe we don't have to do this. I still love you, you know. We had something real. Don't let lawyers ruin it. I ignored him. When that didn't work, he lawyered up. His new argument? That my inheritance was marital property. That he was owed half of it. That I had promised he'd always be taken care of. His lawyer, David, a smug, expensive guy who clearly thought this was an easy win, stood in court and actually said, she should have shared it. I almost laughed. Instead, I let them talk. I let them feel cocky. And then? I pulled out the prenup. Greg's lawyer, David, had been smirking the entire time, leaning back in his chair like he had already won. The moment I handed the document to my lawyer, his smug little smile disappeared. And, my lawyer, flipped to the exact page and read it aloud, any inheritance received by either party shall remain separate property and shall not be subject to division under any circumstances. The judge took the document, adjusted her glasses, and read it twice. Then she looked at Greg's lawyer. Mr. Evans, she said, did you advise your client of this agreement before pursuing this claim? David cleared his throat. Well, Your Honor, we were under the impression that, no, the judge cut him off. There is no impression. This is very clear. Your client has no legal claim to Miss Harper's inheritance. Greg's face turned red. He slammed his hands on the table. This isn't fair. I was supposed to have that money. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Evans, I suggest you lower your voice before I hold you in contempt. Greg sat back down, arms crossed like a spoiled child. And leaned in, lowering her voice just enough that only Greg and David could hear. You should have read the contract before running your mouth. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. After court, I felt relieved. I thought Greg would accept defeat and slither back to whatever miserable existence he had created for himself. Nope. A week later, I got a notice in the mail. Greg was contesting the prenup. He was claiming I had pressured him into signing it under duress, that he was forced to sign against his will. It was a long shot, but it was just enough to drag me back into legal hell. At this point, and was beyond annoyed. This is desperate. It won't hold up. But I knew Greg. When he was cornered, he got dangerous. Not long after Greg filed the motion, weird things started happening. I'd come home from work and find my mailbox left open, even though I always shut it. My car alarm would go off in the middle of the night, but there was never anyone around. Then one evening, I got home and noticed something off about my front door. The lock looked scratched. Like someone had tried to force it open. I felt cold all over. I checked my security cameras, and there he was. Greg. At 2 a.m., standing on my porch, trying to get in. I called the police. Filed a restraining order. Greg played dumb when they questioned him. What? I wasn't breaking in. I just wanted to talk. The officer wasn't buying it. At 2 a.m, Greg shrugged. She's been ignoring me. That got him a temporary protective order, but I knew it wasn't enough. I needed a permanent solution. And I had an idea. Greg had always been careless. He thought he was smarter than everyone. I knew he'd slip up if I gave him enough rope. So I set him up. Through mutual friends, I let it slip that I was considering dropping the prenup battle, that I was willing to negotiate. Greg took the bait. One night, I got a text from a random number. I know we're supposed to stay apart, but I just want to talk. Please, let's fix this. I didn't respond. Then, another message, I can meet you at your place. No lawyers. Just us. Oh, Greg. You absolute moron. I forwarded the texts to my lawyer and the police. That night, I went to stay with a friend. And sure enough, at midnight, my security camera caught Greg trying to break in again. This time, the cops were already waiting. They arrested him on the spot. And now? Now he had bigger problems than money. Greg was hauled off in handcuffs that night, screaming about how this was all some misunderstanding. The police charged him with trespassing, attempted unlawful entry, and violating the restraining order. I thought this was it. That Greg would finally leave me alone. But Greg had one last move, and it was the most unhinged thing yet. 2 weeks after his arrest, I got a call from Anne. Her voice was sharp. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "Greg was suing me. For emotional distress. He was claiming that my restraining order had damaged his reputation and prevented him from finding work." I had to put the phone down for a second because I was laughing so hard. The unmitigated gall of this man. And wasn't amused. "He's asking for $500,000 in damages. For what?" I asked. "Being a creepy, broke loser?" But here's the thing about lawsuits. Even the dumbest ones take time and money to fight. Greg wasn't just trying to win, he was trying to wear me down. And he wasn't done. A week after Greg's lawsuit was filed, my email got hacked. Nothing major was stolen. No money, no bank info. But someone sent emails from my account to Greg's lawyer, pretending to be me. The emails were badly written, full of fake apologies. One of them said, "I feel bad about the restraining order. Greg isn't a bad guy. Maybe we can work something out." I immediately called Anne. Greg was trying to fake evidence that I was changing my story. I went straight to the police. They traced the IP address of the hacker. Guess where it led? Greg's apartment. This man really hacked my email, from his own damn Wi-Fi. That got him another charge, identity fraud. Now, he wasn't just facing a civil case. He was looking at actual jail time. And still, he wasn't done. I had a bad feeling after the email hack. So I changed everything, my passwords, my locks, my security system. I even moved apartments. Then, one night, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened to it, my stomach dropped. It was Greg's mother. I hadn't spoken to her in years. She was always blindly supportive of Greg, no matter what he did. Her message? "I know he messed up, but do you really want to ruin his life? Just drop the charges. Be the bigger person." "Excuse me? Your grown-ass son has been stalking me, hacking me, and trying to steal my money, and you want me to be the bigger person?" I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded it to Anne. Because I knew what was coming next. A week later, Greg went to the press. He contacted a local news blog, telling them a sob story about how I had weaponized the legal system to ruin an innocent man. The article was titled, "She Left Me Penniless. Now She's Trying to Send Me to Jail." I read it 5 times just to make sure it was real. He painted himself as a helpless, struggling artist who had been blindsided by our divorce. He lied about everything. Saying I had cheated, that I had promised him money, that I had used my connections to get him arrested. And the worst part? Some people believed him. I started getting harassing messages online. Random strangers calling me a gold digger. Saying I had ruined a good man's life. Greg had one goal, to make me feel so overwhelmed that I'd drop everything. And for a moment, I almost did. But then, I decided to destroy him. Greg's smear campaign had real consequences. At first, I brushed off the online harassment. Strangers calling me a gold digger, a manipulative witch, even accusing me of making up the restraining order just to punish Greg. But then it escalated. Someone found my work email and sent messages to my boss. They claimed I had destroyed an innocent man's career, that I was a vindictive liar. HR called me in. "Do you know someone named Greg Evans?" my manager asked. I laughed, because what else could I do? "This is my crazy ex-husband," I said. "He's harassing me because I wouldn't give him my inheritance." Thankfully, my company believed me. They forwarded the emails to legal and blocked the senders. But now? I wasn't just fighting Greg in court, I was fighting to keep my reputation intact. And I had had enough. Greg still thought he had a chance in court. His lawyer, David, was still trying to challenge the prenup, saying Greg had signed it under duress. Never mind that he had 7 years to challenge it before the divorce. Never mind that he had enjoyed living off my income the whole time. They had one last argument, that my father had always intended for Greg to share in the inheritance. They even dragged in old emails where my dad had paid for vacations, covered emergency expenses, and once sent Greg money for car repairs. "This shows that Mr. Harper treated Mr. Evans as family," David argued. "It is reasonable to assume he intended for Mr. Evans to benefit from his passing." I saw red. I stood up. "Are you kidding me?" I snapped. The judge looked up. "Miss Harper, control yourself." I turned to David. "My father gave Greg money because he was a broke mooch who never paid for anything. Not because he thought Greg deserved an inheritance. David tried to speak, but I wasn't finished. You really want to talk about my father? I said, my voice shaking. He never liked Greg. He only helped because he knew I was too blind to see what a pathetic loser I had married. You can twist the past however you want, but the prenup is clear. I turned to Greg. I hope this was worth it. Because after today, I'm erasing you from my life. Greg looked away. For the first time, he wasn't smug. He looked small. The judge ruled against Greg. His lawsuit for emotional distress? Dismissed. His attempt to contest the prenup? Denied. His hacked emails? Added to his growing list of legal troubles. And the best part? The judge awarded me damages for the harassment. Greg had to pay $50,000 in legal fees. And if he couldn't pay? The court could seize his assets. Which was hilarious, because Greg didn't own anything. After court, I didn't hear from Greg for weeks. Then, out of nowhere, I got a final email. The subject line? I hope you're happy. The message? A rambling, pathetic guilt trip. He blamed me for everything. Said I had ruined his life. Said he was forced to move in with his mother. That he had no job, no money, no future. And then? The last line. I gave you the best years of my life. You threw me away like garbage. I didn't respond. I blocked his email. Because Greg wasn't garbage. He was dead weight. And I had finally let go. Greg eventually disappeared from my life. The last I heard, he was bartending in a dive bar, telling anyone who would listen that his crazy ex-wife ruined him. Meanwhile, I thrived. I got promoted. I traveled. I fell in love again, with someone who didn't resent my success. And every now and then, I think about Greg. Not with anger. Not with regret. Just relief. Because if he had one, I'd still be dragging him through life. And now, I was free.